Today, I'm going to talk about 12 unexpected culture shocks that I experienced when moving from the United States to Scotland. Hiya, my name is Peter, and 5 years ago, I moved from Oklahoma to the west coast of Scotland with my 11-month-old twins. There are so many things that are different living in Scotland compared to the United States, and today I'm going to talk about some things that kind of surprised me in regards to parenting. I've been here, 5.5 years now. So as far as my kids are concerned, this is all they really know. They were 11 months old when we moved over. So of course they don't remember anything of the United States, even though, we've talked about it. The first aspect that is wildly different in Scotland compared to the United States would be things like maternity leave or paternity leave. Here in Scotland, both parents can receive leave to take care of their children when they are born. In the US, not so much. In the United States, there is no federally required mandate for maternity leave or paternity leave. It's all up to the employer specifically. Some employers do provide limited maternity leave or paternity leave, but even if they do, it's typically not very good, at least not compared to what you'd get here. My last job in the US was a union job, which by American standard had pretty decent benefits. And luckily, I was able to get up to 1 year of paternity leave, unpaid. My partner, on the other hand, worked in the medical field. She worked on an ambulance. And when she told them that she was pregnant with twins, they basically fired her. In the US, they have what they call right to work. And while there are a few things that they legally can't fire you for in the States, like being pregnant or based off of gender, race, religion, etc., these right to work laws also make it so that you can fire someone for no reason at all or for any other reason. So when my partner told her employer that she was pregnant, they told her that she could take maternity leave completely unpaid, and she had up to 30 days of unpaid maternity leave. If she was not back after those 30 days, they would fire her for attendance. 30 days is not enough time for a normal pregnancy, let alone a pregnancy of twins. So even though on paper they didn't fire her for being pregnant, they fired her for being pregnant. If we had already lived here in Scotland when we got pregnant and the twins came, then that would not have been any kind of a concern. We moved to Scotland when the kids were 11 months old. So as far as parenting experience, of course, the majority of my experience with parenting is here in Scotland and not actually in the United States, but I do know a fair amount about it. And one of the big things to consider with kids is healthcare. In the US, they have a few programs for low-income households. In Oklahoma, it's called Sooner Care, is what we were able to get when the kids were on the way. And it does cover some things, but there's a lot of red tape involved and it doesn't cover everything. You can easily have surprise bills, or what happened with us is we had a C-section scheduled, and the night before the scheduled C-section, they called us and said, oh, we have to move to have a completely different hospital, different location to do the C-section, because evidently where we had scheduled and planned it for the entire time wasn't going to take our health insurance. But anyways, one of the more expensive aspects of having children in the US is healthcare. And here in Scotland, this wasn't an unexpected thing. I knew that they had the NHS and free healthcare, but I hadn't really thought about everything that it encompasses. In Scotland, your healthcare is free at point of use, as well as any prescriptions. So anytime the kids are sick, which is, I feel like every day they're sick or every other day, you can take them to the hospital, take them to the doctor. If they need to prescribe any kind of medication, it's completely free. You never have to pay anything out of pocket. And that's a massive weight off your shoulders living here, not having to worry about unexpected healthcare bills. The next big thing is child benefit. Now, I'm not sure, I don't think that most American immigrants would be eligible for this. I'm not sure of all the details around that. However, the kind of the closest equivalent in the States would be the child tax credit. So in the US, everybody has to file their taxes every single year, regardless of whether they're employed or self-employed or living off of savings. They have to file taxes every single year. They don't do that here. Now, the US has no kind of like child benefit payment that comes out monthly or anything like that, but they do have the child tax credit, which is basically if you have children, it can reduce your yearly tax bill. Some of that credit is refundable. So people that have children, especially if you're lower income, you might get a tax refund every year due to the children. Here, you would never get a tax refund every year. And instead they have child benefit, which in Scotland, you have the standard like UK child benefit, as well as a Scottish child payment, which is on top of that. And basically it's like a weekly payment. They send it to you. I think you can do it every week or like once a month, every 4 weeks. And they basically send you a payment based off of how many children you have. It might be maybe 100, 200 pounds a month, something like that. And so if you have children here, it is extremely helpful to cover costs that you would have. The costs of having children here are significantly lower than the US, but it is really nice having that safety net. And I think the cutoff, I think it goes for anyone that has children up until, if you earn over 50,000 pounds a year or something like that, you will be able to get this child payment. The next thing would be so much access to nature and parks. Now in Oklahoma, of course, they've got parks and there is nature there, but not quite like it is here. It's definitely, maybe this is the whole grass is greener on the other side thing, but of course, I think it's much more beautiful here than in the States. But so, in Oklahoma, there were some parks, but usually they're just basically big fields with maybe some trees and some benches and pathways. There's not that much to it. You have to, of course, drive to get there, like you have to drive everywhere. And it's not as accessible as it is here. And weather is, of course, a big concern. In the summer, it's just so hot. And in the winter, it's just so cold that a lot of the time it can be difficult to enjoy the nature that they do actually have. Now, my kids are 6.5 now, which makes me feel really old. And so, of course, they are going to school. Now, one big difference when it comes to school would be in the US, you usually don't have a school uniform unless it is a private, maybe a Catholic school. Your standard public education usually doesn't have a school uniform, whereas here you do. On the flip side, here you have to pay for a uniform for your children for school, but in the US, you have to pay for all their school supplies. So of course, it'll still be more expensive in the States. The school uniforms here, it's really not that expensive. Asda, which is our version of Walmart, they usually carry the standard colors and everything you need for the uniform. But it is one thing that you have to consider when you get your kids ready for school that you don't in the States. On the flip side, you also don't have to get bulletproof backpacks or clear backpacks or anything like that, which is something that you would have to think about in the US. So I'm completely fine with having to buy their uniform, and I think they look cute in it anyways. The next thing is when they're going to school. In the US, you have your stereotypical yellow school bus, and of course, many children will, their parents will drive them to school, but I think the school bus system is the one system of public transportation in the United States that actually is fairly decent at least for its intended use. They have these yellow school buses, very iconic, to pick up the kids from school every day. Here, they don't have dedicated school buses. When kids go to school, they walk, they take the normal bus, or sometimes they'll have charter buses that will be for getting kids to and from school, especially if they maybe live a few towns over. But those are just standard tour buses that are used for the school children temporarily. There's nothing dedicated for getting kids to and from school. And when it comes to getting to school in the mornings, you will see very many children on the standard public transportation, just like any other person would use it. That kind of leads me into my next thing, which is the independence of children here compared to the US. In the US, of course, the United States is by far much, much more dangerous than most of Europe, and especially here in Scotland. So you never really can let your kids, and I certainly wouldn't let my kids walk to school or walk down to the shops by themselves, especially at this age. And here where I live, I see kids all the time that are 4 years old, just walking down the street, going to the shop, playing outside with no adult in sight. It happens all the time. And I mean, personally, I think it's maybe a little bit too lenient. Maybe I'm a helicopter dad. I don't know. I still wouldn't let my kids go running around playing by themselves at 4. Even now, and they're 6 years old, I still wouldn't do it. But it's still, it's still such a much safer place. And I think that I do need to find a balance of, keeping the kids safe and also, of course, letting them have their own independence. But that is one thing that kind of jumps out to you, is that you will see kids, especially when they're going to and from school, you will see kids walking and going places by themselves without a parent or an adult. And you wouldn't really see that as much in the US like you do here. One other thing too, now, this is not necessarily universal, I suppose, but here you can bring your children to the pub. In the US, if you have maybe a restaurant that has a bar inside of it, it might have that, like the bar area will be maybe closed off a bit, and then you have to be over 21 to get to that area. And kids can be in the standard restaurant. But if you've got an actual pub or bar that's just dedicated as a pub or bar, you cannot bring children inside. They card you at the door usually, or they should. And if you're under 21 years old, you cannot go inside that building. Whereas here, it is not like that. There's a pub here in town, and I've been in there myself, and people were in there playing pool with their kids that were maybe a year or two older than mine. Here in the UK, and I'm not sure of all the details, like the specifics of the laws regarding this. I saw something in the news the other day. There's some sort of an uproar about how there was a pub, I think down in England, that did completely ban children in the pub, and some people were upset about it. I believe that it's only during the day, so it's like after 8 p.m. or 9 p.m., children cannot be inside of a pub. But it's definitely a weird culture thing for me, seeing that children can actually go inside of a pub, even if it's limited hours, and obviously they can't buy alcohol. But that's definitely kind of weird seeing that here, and you'd never see that in the US. Next up, there are so many fucking holidays. Of course, in the UK, you've got, by law, a minimum of 28 days a year paid vacation, holidays, and in the US, you have 0. But even though I know in the US, kids do have, summer break, spring break, etc. Here, literally, I feel like every other week or every week, the kids are off with some sort of a holiday, whether it's a long weekend or completely off for 1 or 2 weeks over Easter, Christmas, etc. Every other day, I feel like there's a holiday, and it's just an adjustment. I'm glad that people have holidays here. I don't want that to change, but it's definitely weird, especially being a single dad in a foreign country, having to deal with so many days that the kids are off school, plus days that they're sick and then off school even more. Grocery shopping is a lot of the time more difficult here than it would be in the US, just because the stores are much smaller. So, of course, navigating tight aisles with your shopping trolley, trying to keep track of 2 kids, it can be difficult. But the biggest reason why is it's a lot harder to buy groceries in advance, especially if you're trying to do it on a budget. So I do most of my shopping at Lidl, which is an alternative to Aldi in the US. Lidl doesn't exist there. But the problem is, of course, kids will eat lots of things like fresh fruit. And fresh fruit does not stay fresh very long at all. anytime you buy fresh fruit here, you have to double check everything, because half the time you'll find mold on it while it's still in the store. But even if you buy something that is actually fresh and good, you bring it home, within 2 days, it will most likely be bad. And so, on top of the kids eating so many strawberries, you always you can't just buy a week's worth of groceries in advance and leave it at that. And where I live, we do have a couple of corner shops, like a co-op, but I don't like having to buy groceries there because it's a fair bit more expensive than going to Lidl, which is about a 20-minute drive each way. On top of shopping, just doing any kind of errands is a little bit more difficult with the kids. Now, I'm not going to go into whether this is a good thing or a bad thing. And in general, I think this is a good thing. But here, the drive-through doesn't really exist. The only drive-through I can think of would be at like fast food places like McDonald's, Wendy's, etc. Whereas in the US, pretty much everything has a drive-through. In some states, they have drive-through liquor stores, which I always find funny. But in the States, if you need to go to an ATM drive-through, that's actually a big thing. So I don't really use cash like most people nowadays. But of course, there are some instances where I do need cash. One of those is the one soft play that I take the kids to fairly regularly. They only accept cash. And I do make it a point, I try to keep a little bit of cash on me for those kind of situations, but inevitably I will run out and forget to get more when I don't have the kids. So I will have to take them with. And so if we're going to soft play, I mean, it's not a big deal, but it is an adjustment. I have to stop at an ATM and I have to leave the car to go to the ATM. And depending on exactly where I am, it might not be right where I parked. So instead of just going through a drive-through, getting cash, and then taking them to soft play, I have to find somewhere to park. I have to get the kids out, go get cash, go back to the car, load them up, and then go to soft play, etc. That's something that I wasn't really thinking about when I moved here as much. I knew that drive-throughs weren't as much of a thing. And like I said, I think it's overall a good thing that we don't have everything as a drive-through here. But sometimes it would be nice to have just a little bit of that drive-through convenience for a few things. Now, most of the things that I've talked about have been overall positive, good things. I am so grateful that I'm able to raise my children here as opposed to back in Oklahoma. This last one is a bit tough, and that is the lack of a support network. As an immigrant, of course, when I moved here, I left everything behind in the US. And so, I've got twins. They are 6.5 years old, and maybe they don't really get sick as often as they used to. But the thing is, anytime they get sick, it's, depending on how sick they are, it's usually 2 days or more that they're off of school. They've got a bajillion holidays. And then just the day-to-day schedule, school is from 9 until 3. So it's not, it's just 6 hours a day that they're at school, and then weekends. And it is very difficult because I don't have, family and friends here to leave them with if I need to do something or if there's an emergency. I always have to have my kids. And, the only one that I have here is their mother. So other than when the days that they're with her, it is just me. There's no break, there's no babysitting, none of that. And of course, they do have childcare available here, which is quite a bit cheaper than in the US. It's still challenging. I don't want to, and I'm not going to send the kids to a daycare, childcare type of place every day. But it's one thing that I think if you're looking to move to Scotland, have a good think about how that might affect you and what you can maybe do to help mitigate it, because it can be very challenging having the 24/7 without any kind of break or anything like that. And of course, when I moved here, I wasn't anticipating being a single dad, but it's definitely very isolating when you're in a foreign country without a support network, especially when you've got children. Anyways, that's it for today. Thank you so much for watching. I have made kind of a wee series of videos about unexpected culture shocks with moving from Oklahoma to Scotland. So I will link that up here or here, wherever it goes. And if you haven't already, please hit that subscribe button, like button, all of that stuff that every YouTuber asks you to do. It really does make a difference, especially since they're always tweaking the algorithm. So you definitely want to be able to just look at your subscriptions and you can find my videos there. That's it for now, and I will see you next time.